The moment my mother looked at my 8-year-old daughter and said, "She's not really family anyway." My father silently put down his coffee cup and walked out of the room. At the time, I thought he was avoiding conflict. I didn't realize he had already rewritten his will 3 months earlier. And that one cruel sentence was about to destroy everything my mother thought she owned. My name is Elena, and my daughter Sophie is not biologically mine. I adopted her when she was 3 years old. Her mother, my best friend, Camille, died suddenly after an aneurysm. There was no father in the picture. No close relatives willing to take her. Just a terrified little girl sitting silently in a hospital waiting room holding a stuffed rabbit. And me. I was only 28 then. Single. Broke. Completely unprepared. But the moment Sophie climbed into my lap and fell asleep holding my jacket, I knew. Some people become mothers by blood. I became one by choice. Not everyone in my family supported it. Especially my mother. "Oh Elena, don't ruin your life over someone else's child," she whispered when I first told her. I'll never forget that sentence. Someone else's child. As if Sophie was a burden passed between strangers instead of a grieving little human being. But my father? He surprised me completely. My dad was quiet, old-fashioned, emotionally awkward. Not the type to give speeches about love. But the first time Sophie visited their house, she accidentally spilled orange juice on his expensive recliner. I panicked. "Oh my God, Sophie, apologize." She looked terrified. But Dad just laughed softly and handed her paper towels. "Honey, furniture's replaceable. People aren't." That was the moment Sophie stopped being afraid of him. And over the years, they became inseparable. He taught her fishing. She helped him garden. Every Sunday, they sat together solving crossword puzzles while arguing over impossible clues. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at her with this quiet softness in his eyes. Like she healed something inside him nobody else noticed. Meanwhile my mother stayed distant. Polite in public. Cold underneath. She never openly mistreated Sophie, at least not at first. But there were always little comments. "She doesn't have your eyes. She's very different from our family. You're too attached." As Sophie grew older, she started noticing it too. One night after a family dinner, she asked me quietly, "Grandma doesn't like me very much, does she?" That question broke my heart. Because children always know. No matter how carefully adults hide it. I tried to protect Sophie from it. I really did. But things exploded the summer my father got sick. It started suddenly. Shortness of breath. Fatigue. Hospital visits. Then came the diagnosis. Heart failure. I remember sitting beside his hospital bed while Sophie slept curled beside him in a chair. Dad looked at me quietly and whispered, "Take care of her if I'm gone." I grabbed his hand immediately. "Don't talk like that." But he kept staring at Sophie. Not me. Her. And something about that moment stayed with me. Like he was trying to say more than he could. Over the next few months, my mother became obsessed with family legacy. She constantly talked about inheritance, property, traditions. Especially the lake house. The lake house had been in our family for almost 50 years. It was beautiful. Quiet. Filled with memories. Dad loved that place more than anywhere on earth. And my mother acted like ownership of it was already decided. One evening during dinner, she suddenly announced, "Well, obviously the lake house should stay in the bloodline." The room went awkwardly silent. Sophie looked confused. I felt my stomach tighten. Dad slowly lowered his fork. Then my mother said the sentence I will never forgive. "Well, Sophie's not really family anyway." Everything stopped. I looked at my daughter instantly. Her little face just collapsed. She stared down at her plate pretending not to cry. And my father? He didn't yell. Didn't argue. He just quietly stood up and left the table. At the time, I thought he was hurt. I had no idea what was already happening behind the scenes. That night Sophie cried herself to sleep. And something inside me snapped. The next morning, I packed our bags and left my parents' house early. My mother acted offended. "Oh please, Elena, you're overreacting." I looked directly at her. "No. You finally said the quiet part out loud." Then I took Sophie home. For weeks after that, Dad barely spoke to my mother. He still called Sophie constantly though. Every night. Sometimes just to hear about school. Sometimes to help her with homework over video chat. Then, 3 months later, Dad died. The grief hit like drowning. Sophie cried harder than I'd ever seen. At the funeral, she clutched his old fishing hat against her chest the entire time. And my mother? She barely looked at her. Instead, she spent most of the reception discussing estate matters with relatives. That should have warned me. A week later, the will reading happened. I almost didn't go. I didn't care about money. I just wanted peace. But the lawyer insisted all immediate family attend. So I brought Sophie with me. The atmosphere in that office felt strange immediately. Tense. My mother looked overly confident. My younger brother Mark kept smiling nervously. Then the lawyer opened the file. Most things were normal. Savings divided. Investments split. Then he cleared his throat. And regarding the lake house, my mother actually smiled. Until he continued. Ownership is transferred solely to Sophie Bennett. Silence. Total silence. I genuinely thought I misheard him. What? The lawyer adjusted his glasses calmly. Your father amended the will 3 months ago. My mother's face turned white. That's impossible. The lawyer slid paperwork across the table. Signed. Witnessed. Legal. My father had left the entire lake house to my 8-year-old daughter. My mother exploded instantly. She manipulated him. I stood up so fast my chair nearly fell. Watch your mouth. But the biggest shock came next. Twist number 1. Dad had left a handwritten letter specifically for Sophie. The lawyer handed it to me carefully. My hand shook opening it. Inside, Dad wrote. Family is the people who choose your heart, not your blood. Sophie gave me more love in 8 years than most people give in a lifetime. I completely broke down crying. But my mother wasn't done. That's when twist number 2 hit. Apparently she had secretly been planning to sell the lake house immediately after Dad's death to pay off debts my brother Mark hid from the family. Huge debts. Gambling debts. Dad discovered it shortly before changing the will. And suddenly everything made sense. The sudden obsession with bloodline. The pressure. The coldness toward Sophie. My mother wasn't protecting family tradition. She was protecting financial survival. And Dad knew it. That realization shattered whatever sympathy I still had left. But karma hit hardest a month later. Because once relatives discovered what really happened, people turned on my mother fast. Not because she didn't inherit the house. Because everyone found out why. Including the comment she made about Sophie not being family. Relatives stopped calling. Mark disappeared after more debt collectors showed up. And my mother ended up alone in a house filled with bitterness and regret. Meanwhile Sophie and I visited the lake house together for the first time after Dad's death. She walked slowly onto the dock holding his fishing hat. Then quietly asked me. Why did Grandpa leave it to me? I smiled through tears. Because he wanted you to always have a place where you never question whether you belong. She started crying softly. So did I. That night, while sitting beside the lake, I realized something painful. My father gave Sophie more than a house. He gave her proof. Proof that love chosen freely can become stronger than blood. And honestly, that was worth far more than inheritance.